No, it was other prisoners. Sometimes it was gang-related, sometimes it was just personal vendettas.
How did you protect yourself?
I just stayed who I am. I never denied any of my beliefs, and I stood for the same things that I stood for in prison. And unfortunately, when necessary, I fought for those things.
What do you mean you fought for those things?
Physical violence. I defended myself.
Do you have thoughts about the prison system today, having lived through it, having survived it, and how the prison system works in this country?
I think it's a broken system. We take our troubled people and we throw them away with no solution, and we do not offer them a way to improve their livelihood. In the 10 years that I was in prison, there was no rehabilitation offered. There's no skill sets that they offer to teach you. The closest that comes is they offer some people a GED, but if you don't meet certain requirements, then you're restricted from even that. When I first went to prison, I attempted to take college correspondence courses, and I was told quite simply that I had too much time, and so therefore I wouldn't be allowed to do anything.
So were you ever able to?
In my last year, I was able to take college classes finally.
Jeff Luers, explain what happened when the court overturned your sentence. Explain the rationale and what they said.
My original conviction and sentence gave me 3 sentences for the same fire. The Court of Appeals decided that there was only one fire, there could only be one punishment, and that all of those charges had to merge into one conviction and one sentence.
Were you surprised that the system worked in your favor that time?
I wasn't surprised that the Court of Appeals agreed with me. The legal error was quite grievous. What I was surprised about is how greatly my sentence reduced.
And how did that shift the way you thought, your captivity, knowing you were going from 22 to less than 10 years?
It's a huge culture shock. I imagine it's probably hard for people at home to imagine, but I lived in a maximum security prison in a tiny cell, and basically overnight I went from having experienced nothing but that for 6 years to living in a dorm with 80 people, and it was hard. It was a difficult adjustment going from a mentality of constantly watching your back and being ready to fight at every second to being around so many people and trying not to be freaked out by that.
There has been a very active support group for you over the years that you've been in prison. What did that mean to you inside, Jeff Luers?
It meant everything. I think that people cannot at all underestimate how important letters and emotional support are. The campaign for my release, without a doubt, helped me get out of prison, but it's the letters that helped me get through prison.
And what was it like, as you described, being free for this last week and going into nature that you had been trying to defend before you went to prison for years? What was that feeling to go from behind bars to the wild?
It's really surreal. It took several days for me to accept that it was finally over, that I could wake up in the morning and go outside and be free. The first hike that I went on, everything just seemed like stuck in time until at a certain point it just hit me. I was back where I belonged.
What are the conditions of your release now?
They're the pretty standard parole package. I cannot commit crime or possess any drugs. I have to stay away from my co-defendant, and I'm ironically enough not allowed to possess a bomb.
Why do you say ironically enough?
Well, it's against the law to possess a bomb to begin with, but they specified that in my parole conditions.
And do you plan to continue to be an outspoken environmentalist? And what form will that take now?
I'm definitely going to continue with my environmental and social justice activism. It's a little too early for me to be deciding what form that's going to come in at this point. Personally, right now, I'm looking forward to going back to school and just re-experiencing life again before I decide to get heavily involved in activism.
I wanted to bring in your attorney, Regan. You're the executive director of the Civil Liberties Defense Center. You've represented Jeff for a long time. Can you talk about his case in a larger context of how the authorities have dealt with, well, cases like Jeff's? His first, this enormous sentence of 22.5 years, it being overturned, and how it all fits together.
Well, at the time that Jeff was first sentenced, the 22 years and 8 months that he received from the judge was the longest sentence of any environmental or animal rights activist in the United States. And as Jeff mentioned, it was clearly imposed to send a message. He and his co-defendant were the first people to be actually apprehended while committing an arson. There had been a few other arsons starting back in 1997 that are now referred to as part of the Green Scare. But those crimes had been unsolved and law enforcement had no leads at all. When they apprehended Jeff and Craig, they thought that they had apprehended suspects in all of those other unsolved crimes. And it turned out that that was not the case at all. But they were very, very interested in information that they believed that the two had. Part of, I think, the reason that there were no plea deals for Jeff was because they really were putting the screws to him in order to cooperate and name other people. As it turns out, even in the government's own discovery, they acknowledged that Jeff probably had no information about any of those other arsons, but at the time, that was definitely part of their focus. And as Jeff mentioned, even in the federal system, the crime of arson normally carries about a 2-year prison sentence. So the fact that this particular act of economic sabotage created very little monetary damage, but yet he, got over 10 times what someone who would have committed an arson for agreed purpose would have received, definitely drew the attention of the global community. Amnesty International and a number of other human rights groups, including a human rights organization in Eugene, all decried his sentence when it happened. And of course, the lawyers that surrounded him knew right away that this judge had attempted to mathematically create the longest sentence possible and attempted to impose it on him. We were just really gratified that the Court of Appeals took the politics out of that case and looked at the law and corrected a really grievous mistake.
Well, let's talk about politics. The issue of a person who is convicted, who is voicing political motives versus someone who's involved with a common crime. How is that dealt with, Regan?
Well, under our Constitution, we have this Equal Protection Clause, which is supposed to say that like crimes are treated in a like manner. And so whether or not you burn a house down for insurance fraud, or whether you burn a building down to destroy a horse slaughterhouse facility, the law is supposed to look at those things in an equal manner and not create disparity between those two crimes. But particularly during the Bush administration and with the prosecution of the Green Scare cases, whether it is because the government is pandering to corporate dominance, or whether or not the government really does feel that radical activism is this huge threat to them, There have been a number of cases where activists have received